All right, so Mike, should we get started on the hearing?
Certainly, Mayor. Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Bissonette. I'm an assistant city solicitor with the city of Holyoke. Holyoke is currently undergoing what's known in the cable industry as ascertainment. That means to ascertain what the needs of the community are, as Holyoke considers whether or not to renew Comcast's current license for a period of either 5 or 10 years. Under federal law, let me be clear, the city of Holyoke can license a provider to provide cable television to the community. However, the cable company cannot be prohibited from any content, any stations, and the city cannot set the rates for cable television. Those are federal rules, not state or local rules. So the charges that you see are part of the federal code, and they have been in place since the early 70s. Tonight, the mayor, who is the licensing authority for the city of Holyoke, will begin the ascertainment process through this medium by asking you, the citizens of Holyoke, your views on the possibility of Comcast continuing. Do you have complaints? Do you have concerns? That's what the mayor is here for, to listen to your concerns as we begin contract negotiations. Thank you for tuning in, and without further ado, let me introduce the mayor of the city of Holyoke, Josh Garcia. Mr. Mayor?
Thank you, Michael. So this is my first time doing one of these hearings, and I know here in the audience, just so that folks know, I do have members of the Holyoke Media Board who are present, and then I also have a representative from Comcast that's present here in the room as well. Mike, just, the form of process here, rather than just going, does anybody have any input? Are there anything we want to share as far as what the contract terms are in the existing contract versus other things that we might be able to consider in this new contract?
I think as we discussed, there have been significant changes to the cable industry over the past decade. Just look at how most people are receiving content now. It's more via the internet and websites than it is from cable. So there's a real question going forward concerning the industry itself and what next steps should be taken. As a sidelight, the city, no city has any control over the provision of internet services. So when companies such as Spectrum Charter or Comcast also provide internet, that is not something that's regulated by the city. So there's a very narrow sort of area in which the city can try to ascertain what Comcast needs to improve its service to the community, its service calls, its troubleshooting, its consumer relations as it relates to handling complaints. And also, the city will be looking to negotiate fees and a fee structure, along with a substantial commitment to be able to fund and equip Holyoke Media. Those are the sorts of resources that Holyoke will need to continue to provide this sort of programming, as well as all the council meetings and other forms of local governance that you get to see through these grants from the cable company. So that's pretty much where we're at. Right now, the process will be that the city will request proposals once the ascertainment hearing is over from the current provider. And as some of you may know, in the most recent contracts, there has been provisions to allow competitors to also bid. Now, being frank, there's a limited amount of interest in something like that, just simply because of the buildup involved, or someone would have to purchase all of the Comcast equipment. So that likely is prohibitive in terms of an additional cable provider. So that's something that is already in the contract. We'll see if anybody else wants to bid. Based on our experience and looking at these issues, it's unlikely, but we'll put it out there and see if anybody else may be interested. At that point, Comcast is entitled to also submit a request to renew their contract and a draft contract in response to the request for proposals. So that's a summary of where we're at, Mayor. And the next step is to hear from the citizens. We'll take their comments. I would note that the mayor can continue to take comments right up until the end of the renewal period. So during the next 6 months, as we go through this, anyone who may want to reach out and let Mayor Garcia know what they're thinking, feeling about Comcast, please feel free. Those doors are open, and text, write, stop in. The process is open to everyone.
Let me just clarify that real quick. So when the end of our existing contract ends when?
It's May of next year.
May of next year, okay. March 11 of 24. It's got the clarification here, Mike. Okay, so even beyond this hearing, folks will still have an opportunity to offer some input. There are, I know, Jen, I'd love, and we have this open meeting, and there were some points you brought up in an informal one-on-one discussion. You'd mentioned to me, and some ideas you had to include. Do you mind going through them and sharing some of your thoughts on some input on this next coming contract?
I'd like to greet the dog that just barked, first and foremost. Everyone is welcome here. Hi, Jennifer Miskowski. I am the president of the board of directors of Holyoke Media and also a resident of the city of Holyoke. We gave you, the board and Holyoke Media gave you a list of items that were capital needs for this organization and also for the media center at the high school. I don't know what all those things are off the top of my head, so I cannot list those off, but they are all things to keep Holyoke Media and the media center at the high schools in cutting-edge equipment so that we are providing services to the community. And on the subject of the services to the community, if anyone is tuning in who is not familiar with what's happening at Holyoke Media, this is a community center featuring or focused on media and giving access to everybody in the community, media services such as access to cameras and broadcasting and things like that. So that is what our main, from a Holyoke Media perspective, that is
needs.
Capital needs, exactly, and also maintaining the contract going forward because this community center is funded by the contract with Comcast.
So the capital needs was one of them. Are there any others? Any other input?
I would really love to bring my dear friend and our executive director, Scott McPherson, to the microphone to discuss some of these things because he's better versed. Scott.
Thank you, Jen.
Hi. Scott McPherson, Executive Director of Holyoke Media, and we'll submit this in writing to you as well,
okay.
and publish it out through our social media and our website so people can see the comments that we submitted. So a couple, going into this contract negotiation, there are a couple of things that I would encourage the city to request. Per section 3.1 of the existing contract, request information documenting the licensee's compliance with the existing contract. Per section 4.12 of the existing contract, request a strand map, which indicates, this is language from the contract, in reasonable detail the current location of all transmission and reception lines used for the purveyance of cable services, and any use of distribution amplifiers or signal conversion devices therein. per section 13.6 and 13.5, request a performance test at locations throughout the system to document, to provide to ensure the quality of and capacity of the to the home service. And also, per section 5.3, there's a provision in the existing contract allowing them to provide, the licensee to provide leased access, just a listing of the leased access channels that are currently being used. And then beyond those requests that are contained in the current contract, Holyoke Media would like to see the current PEG funding levels maintained at 5% of the licensee's gross annual revenues, excluding any subscriber or cable or capital fees. That our studio at One Court Plaza should be added to the list of free drops with monthly service for the purpose of monitoring our signals. That all locally originated public access channels should be provided in high definition. That all public access channels, channel programming should be included in the electronic program guide. That, geez, I'm going from my notes now. That discounts be offered to senior citizens. Thank you, Scott. Done with that. The discounts be offered to senior citizens for services, and that, where's the other one? Senior discount, and I think that's it. I feel like I had one more thing, but I'll make sure it's in my written comments.
I think there was something about ads too.
Definitely, there's definitely curiosity about the possibility of having access to ad services for locally created advertising content, marketing the community, as well as some of the events and things that are going on here through the cable's existing ad insertion services.
And as far as our senior citizens are concerned, what about elderly that haven't transitioned off their TV set to high def televisions? Mm-hmm. So having equipment or making sure that those are accessible to the elderly.
Yeah, I believe it's probably stipulated in there somewhere that the signal should be convertible coming out of the service boxes. Okay. I think I'd have to review that though.
All right. Any other input? Dennis?
No, not. Thank you, Mayor. Dennis Luceriaga. I'm on the board of Holyoke Media. I don't have any specific input, but I was just curious about this ascertainment process. So this will go on until the actual contract renewal. I guess that was just stated. Is there an issue that there hasn't been much, or there's not many people here today? I mean, do you find that possibly that might be an issue going forward? That there's not enough of an input on the side of subscribers? The reason I ask is I'm just wondering if going forward, something might come up.
So I think, Dennis, as far as process and the law, there isn't any issues. However, we do have a year and a few months before this contract expires. I'd be happy to organize one or two more
because
hearings.
I think we're partly at fault that this came up so quickly, and I think possibly we haven't really promoted it enough. So
I know. I mean, even about a month ago or 2 months when we first started talking about this, I remember telling folks at Holyoke Media that I'd love support in trying to get this out there. And you're right, public meetings or community input, the most important part of government, is also the most difficult.
Yeah.
We share it. It's legally posted, but obviously in a community like Holyoke, we have to be intentional.
Yeah,
And invite. I shared it
yes.
on social media platforms, but you're right. I think the good news is that we still have time
So we can
before-
schedule more.
So I'm all for scheduling more.
All right,
I
because
think,
yeah, I'm
I think
sorry, go ahead.
Mike and I even talked about, even, it won't be a terrible idea to have one in one of the city council meetings too.
Oh, okay.
But certainly, I think there are a lot of, I know there are a lot of good ideas. Just speaking with Jen and just listening to Scott and their list, there are a lot of good ideas that I think is worth bringing up in these negotiations. But obviously, I want to be sure, to your point, Dennis, that if we can do a better job getting more input and bodies in here to offer some input, I'm all for that.
Yeah, I totally agree, because we definitely want to cover the legal side of it, but we truthfully want to hear from folks.
Yeah,
Who
with a million other things that I'm juggling in the city, I try to recruit help and try to be proactive earlier on, but obviously everybody's busy and
absolutely.
we do our best.
Totally understood.
We did schedule 2. We had one yesterday and no one showed up. And then Holyoke Media shared it, I shared it, and this is the result. But again, in a community like Holyoke, when soliciting input, it requires non-traditional approaches, and it
Sure.
requires us to be intentional in how we get feedback. So on the glass half full side here is that it's not like the contract's up tomorrow and I got to make a decision. So any help I can get from the community and members of the team here in the city of Holyoke to solicit feedback,
Yeah,
I want it. Absolutely.
sounds good. All right, that's pretty much all I had. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yep, we do
Well,
have
Mimi
one guest here, and Mimi Panich, is there any feedback that you want to offer? Thoughts, suggestions? Hey, Mimi.
Well, I tuned in tonight purely because I saw it posted on social media. I knew that the contract was coming up eventually. And obviously, as a citizen, I have an interest, but I don't know anything about the process. So I didn't even know where to start thinking about questions or needs. I thought I would show up tonight and see what I could learn. And what I've learned so far is that I think the community as a whole needs to know what is up for discussion here. There's no point in people showing up to complain about, say, internet service, because that's clearly not on the table. I know that just anecdotally, everybody is thrilled with Holyoke Media. That's really been exciting to see. And to the extent that they have ideas that they would like support for, I bet you support can be drummed up pretty easily. But that was all I had, because I'm really just here to listen. And if I can help at all going forward, I will.
Thank you, Mimi. So basic, and Mike can clarify this, but from what I understand, when contracts is up with the cable provider, we're required to have these public hearings, or what do you call them, ascertainment to receive public feedback and input. And to be fair to Dennis's point and now Mimi's, I think, what we can do, put a summary together and some of the contract terms, or the contract terms that we have currently within our existing contract that's expiring soon, and then also share some of the feedback I've received to date, ideas that have been offered. Because I think the other complicated thing here for the average folks in the public is not knowing what can be negotiated or what can be, so I think that if we shared some of these ideas, it might inspire and trigger other ideas from folks in the community. So obviously, we can't negotiate rates, unfortunately, but instead, here are things that have been in the contract in case you weren't aware. Oh, and by the way, here are some other ideas that were brought up that can be included. What do you think? So, you know, and just for folks that are gonna be watching this recording, and the people that are here right now, you know, I think between now and the next month or 2 months, I can put a one-pager together, and I can really use some help in getting more feedback, and input. Maybe we can do a 60-day or 90-day review of ideas that were shared and see if anybody else had any other input. And again, I work great with the council. I'm more than happy to have one of these at a council level meeting, or we can try again to have another hearing here in Holyoke Media at a different date, with a non-traditional, intentional approach with outreach efforts. Any thought or concerns or suggestions on that? I did hear.
I think that one pager about what's up for discussion sounds great.
Okay. I did hear Scott share some points about, you know, and I don't even know, and the questions will be for the representative, having it available in high definition, public access channels. Is that something that you do in other communities?
They're beginning to do it. It's always something up for negotiation. There's issues that go in with it, but we're more than happy to discuss it with the community.
And there's some other ideas he shared was, the thing was, Jen, capital, is there usually a term in the contract arrangements about committing to capital outside of the, what is he say, 5%? Yeah.
So Holyoke does receive a capital grant. They receive under the current contract.
You want to just come into the speaker? No worries.
For the record, Eileen Leahy, Senior Manager of Government Relations for Comcast. I'm a representative for the community of Holyoke. Currently, under the contract, Comcast provided $603,000 in capital to the city. They received $200,000 within the first 45 days of the signing of the contract, which was back in 2014. And then they receive an annual grant. It's usually, I believe it's July's payment date of $40,300. And then they receive the quarterly 5% franchise fee payments quarterly. So they come out in like March, June, August, and November, I believe it is, so.
So we're currently at 5%, and what
Which is
Scott was sharing was to continue to maintain that, okay?
And 5% is the highest that a community can
And
receive.
outside of that, we get capital dollars. What was the, so you just shared,
$603,000 you received from us.
so what was the formula that got us to the, you know what I mean?
So
Was there, go ahead.
there's really, it's based on the cable-related needs of the community.
Okay.
Is really what the formula is. I wasn't with Comcast during the last negotiation, so I don't know what was discussed and how they got to that number, to be honest with you. What we're looking for and what we want to see is this is why we have these hearings, the ascertainment. What are the needs of the community, and does the amount of money you're asking for support these needs? And that's what the ascertainment helps us to do,
Okay.
so.
So, all right. So there's that $600,000+ of capital that you've issued, but it was mostly during conversations and trying to understand need. But there's a dollar amount that we can potentially negotiate.
It's all negotiable, and
Yep, okay.
it's all based on the needs of the cable-related needs of the community, so.
Now, another idea that I think Scott shared on this list was making it affordable for seniors. Anything in our current contract that,
There's a senior discount in Holyoke.
there is a senior
Yes,
discount?
there is.
Okay. And so, is there any other, and this is really, I guess, us to do some research, unless you have some examples of other communities, what other communities are doing to support affordability for seniors outside of the
So-
senior discount?
Outside the senior discount, there is the ACP program through the federal government, which is a $30 a month credit.
Okay.
But that's can go towards your internet or your cell phone. So it's not really cable related, but it does help reduce the cost to a person's monthly bill. There's also the Internet Essentials program, which is $9.99 a month for internet service. Again, it's not part of the cable
Yeah, I
renewal.
was gonna say.
But
right, okay.
it's, I mean, this is ways that we help the community, we try to help people, make it more affordable for people. Holyoke, everybody in Holyoke would be eligible for that program due to the community and, because we're a free lunch community, so under that, guys, we're able to get it. But that's $9.95 a month internet, and you can also get a computer for $150. Or a
Oh,
laptop.
sweet.
It's a great program. I mean, it helps millions. It really is a great program, and I provide information in the past. I can provide more. I can send you more information for it, and we try to get it out to the schools and everything so people know about it.
Okay.
So those would be the other two programs I would suggest looking into.
And can we negotiate user rates?
No.
I thought I'd try.
No, sorry. It's just,
I was testing you.
yeah, no. It's just, it's really just the funding and build-out areas, but Holyoke is 100% built out, so there's no.
So I know Scott mentioned, do you currently evaluate coverage in areas to see what people, whether or not they're getting
So our
adequate
network-
access
So
in the network?
we're always monitoring our network 24/7. There's always monitor going on. If there's an area in town where people are having a problem, if the address is given to me, I can have my engineers and technicians go out and take a deeper dive in those areas, which we've done in the past for Holyoke.
Yep, I remember West
Yeah.
Holyoke was having some
Yeah, West
challenges, and
Holyoke,
you came
exactly.
right in and send your people out
Yep.
there, and it turned out to work well.
So the best thing for us is not just to say, all of Holyoke has bad service. We hear that. You got to be this, particular area or this street, so we can drill down right to that area, and that's best for me to have an address.
So you were talking about your programs, and I think that's also outside of your contract terms, unless we can bake it into contract terms. What about affordability for low-income neighborhoods? Anything there that you guys
Again,
offer?
you'd fall back to the Internet Essentials program and then the ACP program through the government.
Okay. Just the folks that are here, anything that we just talked about, did you have something that came up to mind that you want to bring up or ask about?
I would just like to request that the city make the date for the next ascertainment hearing now, and that we start promoting it immediately, because this one was only announced like last week, so it's kind of not that surprising that people aren't here. It's a high vacation time with school just getting out and all that kind of stuff.
That's fair.
And so if we could try to schedule a meeting, we'd love to host it here at Holyoke Media again, but if we could schedule a meeting with at least 6 weeks' notice so that we can promote it and try to get people here, because to Eileen's point, this is how Comcast knows what we need, and also can see community support, and we need that real bad. So, thank you.
Michael, any issues with that, or anything you want to respond to?
No. No,
Okay.
that would be perfectly fine.
Yep.
As I said, once tonight's hearing is complete, the city can notify Comcast that is prepared to go forward. And then whatever additional steps that you decide to take, Mayor, in terms of hearings, I know we talked yesterday about doing another hearing in September because of the low turnout and the short notice. So I think you were right on point there. But we can certainly do 2 more hearings in September, and by then we may have a better handle on where we stand in contract negotiations. Might be something that we can sort of tune in and hone in on as we move towards completing the contract.
Okay. No, and actually, I'm glad that we're here at this hearing and talking about this, because what I want to do to prepare for the next hearing, what I'm going to do is bullet the things that were talked about today, as well as those others. I have notes on my desk. I should have brought them, but there were some other ones. When we met, I made a list of all the ideas we talked about. And so that way, when we're preparing for the September meeting, I think that's a good idea too, out in September, I'm including with that the information that we just talked about now. We'll bullet them all and say, here's a list of things that can potentially be negotiated and that are good, and here's why, what do you think? And maybe you have other ideas we're not thinking of. And then that way we can all work together and encourage folks to engage at that meeting, to be prepared to offer input on that. But before we start sharing calendars, Johan is also here in the room participating, and just want to make sure I hear from everybody. Johan, did you want to offer any? You're good? And then is there anything that you want to share as well?
I'm all set.
All set? All right, so Mike, Eileen, Jen, do you guys want to share calendars now and see if there's a date in September we can agree to? And
Sure, I'm pretty open for the most, to be honest with you.
We need the Holyoke Media calendar, so we need Scott for that, so that we can book this space. Let me grab them. You have the full calendar? Okay, go on, please.
so I'm just throwing that out there. When does school start? August, I'm assuming, or September?
It's the end of August.
End of August? I'm looking at, what do you folks think about September 14? And we'll do it after 5.
That's fine. What day of the week is that? I'm just curious.
It's a Thursday.
Perfect.
Is that okay?
It's good by me, Mayor. Thank you.
Good for you?
And
So-
we're having our annual meeting of the membership on the 12th of September, so we can really drum up.
Announce it.
Yep. Obviously, we'll announce it in advance of that.
Cable hearing. 5:30, 6 o'clock?
I would say 6. You gotta give people time to get out of work and grab a snack.
So for everyone that's here and for folks that are watching this recording from home, we are going to prepare for another hearing, September 14, 6 o'clock at Holyoke Media, located at, address?
One Court Plaza.
One Court
One
Plaza.
capital, one court place.
Yep, and so we'll have a one-pager summary of potential terms that could be negotiated, existing terms, to drum up interest, and anybody and everybody, please help get the word out so that we could have a good showing and good input and feedback so that we can proactively negotiate a good contract with Comcast for this renewal that expires March 2024,
March
which, again, plenty of time.
2024.
9 months.
Excellent. Any other comments, questions, concerns, feedback? Again, although, not necessarily the turnout we'd hope, reminding folks that public engagement, very important, also very hard, which requires us, especially in a community like Holyoke, to be intentional when we engage the public. But nevertheless, I am happy that we still had this meeting, because it just allows us to be a little bit, it's almost like a planning session we just had, to be a little bit more prepared in how we share information to the public so that folks understand more or less what can be negotiated to spark up some ideas from the public on what input they want to offer. So with that being said, thank you for the folks that did show up for your time, and looking forward to see you at the next hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mike.